So there is a sense of discomfort in global south countries about the tariff from US being talked about. So being a de facto spokesperson for global south, will India be discussing that with Mauritius as well?
Krishna Mohan.
Sir, Krishna Mohan Sharma from Bharat Express. Mauritius is a sort of facing a lack of skilled human resources, and we have ample of human resources. So, is there any possibility that we will have a sort of talk or deal on the exchanging human resources from India to Mauritius?
Okay, I think Siddhant, regarding your question on Chagos, I think you are aware of insofar as India is concerned, our stance on Chagos. It's well known. We've supported Mauritius in its stance on its sovereignty over Chagos, and this is obviously in keeping with our long-standing position with regard to decolonization and support for sovereignty and territorial integrity of our other countries, and it's only fitting for us to articulate this support for partners such as Mauritius. You are also aware that for quite some time there have been extensive discussions and negotiations that were held between Mauritius and the UK last year. The previous government in Mauritius was also involved with these negotiations, and certain arrangement had been arrived at. Naturally, after a new government has taken power in Mauritius, they have taken a relook at some of the provisions. Nevertheless, it is something that is continued to be discussed between Mauritius and the UK, and we understand that they have engaged each other quite intensively and have also perhaps arrived at a mutually acceptable deal on the subject. The details are really for them to agree on. Of course, the additional element is that there has been a change in government in the United States as well, which is in some senses also associated or affected by these discussions. Again, these are issues to be resolved between the concerned parties. We, for our part, have continued to support Mauritius and will continue to do so. I would imagine that during the visit, there will be an opportunity perhaps for the Mauritius side to update us on any issues that might still be outstanding, if there are any issues by that time. But for the rest, we continue to support Mauritius in its efforts to reach a mutually satisfactory and mutually beneficial deal with its interlocutors on this particular issue. Insofar as the question on Agalega was concerned, again, I think it was on the previous visit of the Prime Minister in 2015 that an MOU had been signed on the improvement of facilities on Agalega Island for sea and air connectivity. And pursuant to that MOU, these facilities were created on the island, and last year in February, the facilities were jointly inaugurated by the Prime Ministers of the two countries. The facilities have contributed to enhancing connectivity between the island and mainland Mauritius. And I must share with you that I saw and experienced firsthand, or well, in the sense that I was with Mauritian interlocutors last year and discussed with them their experience of a very devastating cyclone that had just gone through Mauritius and had particularly affected Agalega quite badly. We had managed to mobilize our assets very quickly, and utilizing and leveraging the facilities that had been created in Agalega, were able to deliver much needed assistance and relief material to the people in need on the island. There were sorties also that were conducted between Agalega and the mainland to undertake additional relief operations. So during my visit there, my interlocutors were extremely appreciative of the fact that it is the creation of these facilities that has allowed this kind of early and very quick response to take place and to bring real relief to people who were affected by this disaster. Of course, these facilities have also been assisting Mauritius in its maritime surveillance and patrolling of its vast exclusive economic zone, and in safeguarding the assets of its blue economy ecosystem from traditional and non-traditional maritime challenges. As you're aware, this is a region that is particularly beset by challenges of various kinds, such as piracy, drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc. So this is a facility which I think at the end of the day has already proven its worth and will continue to prove its worth for Mauritius. Rishabh, your question on tariffs. Well, I mean, there is perhaps likely to be a general discussion on how different countries can react to this new narrative related to trade and tariffs that we see currently hitting the headlines. Obviously, there is no one-size-fits-all solution that is possible on this. Different measures are being taken for different countries, and different countries are going to be impacted differently depending on the makeup of their economies, their current sort of situation in terms of their terms of trade. So I would imagine that there would be a certain amount of discussion on this particular issue. Maybe we'll be able to brief you after the visit on the content of these discussions and any understandings that might have been reached. I think there was a question on the understandings we plan to reach on financial crimes, combating financial crimes. This is a memorandum of understanding that is proposed to be concluded between the Enforcement Directorate and the Financial Crimes Commission of the Republic of Mauritius. It essentially aims at providing intelligence and technical assistance cooperation on anti-corruption and anti-money laundering activities. And it will also help in identifying emerging trends, knowledge exchange, and adapting to new methodologies in this particular area. We'll share more details with you once the final agreement has been signed. Krishna Mohan ji, आपका सवाल था about lack of skilled human resource in Mauritius. सही आपने एक तरह से इस सवाल को पकड़ा है, क्योंकि ये एक ऐसा इशू है जिसके बारे में बातचीत चल रही है, और इस विज़िट के दौरान तो नहीं, लेकिन हमारी आशा है कि मॉरिशस के साथ इस बातचीत को आगे ले जाया जाएगा, और जो हम ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज और स्किल्ड रिसोर्सेज के बारे में जो आदान प्रदान कर सकते हैं, उसके बारे में आगे बातचीत होगी, और समझौता होने की भी संभावना आगे है इसको लेकर. In fact, there is an MOU that we plan to sign between the Ministry of Public Service and Administrative Reforms of the Government of Mauritius and the National Centre for Good Governance on the Indian side, essentially to undertake training of 500 Mauritian civil servants over 5 years at the National Centre for Good Governance. And it will focus on senior leadership and middle management and technical officers from Mauritius.
Can one more? Yes, sir. More questions? Huma?
Sir, you talked about the defense and maritime security. So will there be any discussion related to expanding that cooperation? And also, there was some talk of opening hospital and under Jan, yeah. So, if you can talk about that.
Keshav?
Good evening, Foreign Secretary. This is Keshav Padmanabhan from The Print. My question is sort of related on this defense and maritime security, given that Mauritius has signed the Colombo Security Conclave Charter and is a part of these various regional organizations that India is a part of. So how do you see that proceeding from the Prime Minister's visit, especially the Colombo Security Conclave in that sense? Could you give us a sense of whether that's going to be discussed and how that will proceed forward? Thank you.
Please.
So, Sumita from ET now, I want, if you could perhaps elucidate a bit more on the development partnership and what India is looking forward specifically with respect to trade and economic partnership. And secondly, sir, it's a follow-up question to what you said that there's likely going to be a general discussion on how different countries are reacting to the new narrative that's related to trade and tariffs. Just wanted to clarify and get, your India's position on that. If you could perhaps elucidate a bit more on that.
Srinjoy?
So, regarding additional security cooperation with Mauritius, especially in the naval area, do you see the possibility of having either sharing an OPV or a similar ship, or ensuring that one stays in that Port Louis area in the near future?
Mukesh?
सर वो ऋषभ का आगे मैं सवाल ले जाना चाहता हूँ कि आपने कहा कि टैरिफ को लेकर वन साइज कैनॉट फिट ऑल, तो क्या ये मान के चला जाए, आप ये बोल रहे हैं कि टैरिफ शुड नॉट बी वेपनाइज्ड और ये सिर्फ बायलैटरल एग्रीमेंट होना चाहिए?
नीरज?
सर नमस्कार, मैं नीरज दुबे प्रभा साक्षी से। मेरा सवाल ये कि सर 2015 का जो प्रधानमंत्री जी का विजिट था मॉरिशस का, उस समय उन्होंने सागर विजन की जो घोषणा की थी, उसको आगे बढ़ाने के लिए इस विजिट में क्या है सर?
Okay, Sudhi, please.
Thank you, sir, for allowing me. Foreign Secretary, if you will, if you could give us an understanding on the remarks that have come from President Trump on tariffs. Since you're answering questions on tariff, he's kind of indicated that India has kind of agreed to pull down tariffs. If there is an understanding you could give us.
All right. I think here the questions are largely in two baskets of defense, maritime cooperation, Sagar, etc., and on development partnership and trade-related questions. So on the defense and maritime security side, I think there is already a lot that we have accomplished together with Mauritius in terms of contributing to its maritime safety and security related issues. During the current visit, we expect to sign a technical agreement on sharing white shipping information between the Indian Navy and Mauritius authorities. It will further enhance maritime security of Mauritius, safety of its trading corridors, and enhance regional cooperation in real-time sharing of data will enable Indian authorities and Mauritius authorities to cooperate in preventing illegal activities, improve Mauritius's maritime domain awareness in the region. This will involve not just the Indian Navy but also the Mauritius police force in an effort to combat these kinds of activities. There is an allied MOU that will be signed between the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. This is in COIS with the Ministry of Earth Sciences and the Prime Minister's office from the Mauritius side, which also establishes a comprehensive framework for cooperation on ocean observation, research and information management, and enhancing maritime zone management in Mauritius. This will involve a lot of technical activities such as ocean modeling and focus on capacity building and training in this particular area. There will be engagement on the latest technologies, collaboration on best practices, data management, remote sensing, etc. We'll provide details of this once this is done between the two sides. On the related question of a platform in Mauritius, I think we have already we have already provided Mauritius with a Coast Guard ship which was provided through grant as well as loan assistance, the CGS Barracuda, and then through a soft loan another platform which is the CGS Victory. And in addition, there is a whole bunch of fast interceptor craft that were also provided to Mauritius. So I think we have been providing them with these kinds of assets, and if there is a need felt for more to be done in this regard, we would be ready to examine those proposals as well. On development partnership in general, the consolidated portfolio of development assistance to Mauritius just in the last decade is nearly $1.1 billion. Of this, about $729 million is through lines of credit, and nearly $427 million is through outright grant assistance. The bouquet of projects that has been executed contains everything from 3 phases of the Metro Express. This is one of the most striking things that you can see across the Mauritian landscape today. An ENT hospital, social housing units, the Supreme Court building, Civil Service College, which is going to be, I think, inaugurated during the coming visit. I think Huma had a question on health-related issues, so there is an area health center that will also be inaugurated during the coming visit. There is a scheme under which e-tablets were provided for school children, firefighting pumps, medical clinics, solar projects, and I've already mentioned what we've done in terms of the naval and Coast Guard assets that we've provided. So essentially there is a very wide spectrum of development cooperation related projects that has been done, and we are continuing to work on other projects now in the run-up to the visit as well. Insofar as the questions related to trade and tariff are concerned, I think insofar, I mean, I know there is a lot of interest in the statements coming out of the United States. I will not get into that at this point in time because these are ongoing discussions, so it would not be right to get into it. But I would only point you towards the fact that we have in recent times entered into bilateral trade agreements which are based on tariff liberalization with several partners. There are ongoing discussions with several other partners on these issues now, and I think the ongoing discussions should be seen in that context as well. So I think that is our general approach, and I think it applies to any such engagement that we have with any country on these issues, on potential trade agreements, etc. And नीरज जी का सवाल था सागर विजन के बारे में. तो जैसा मैंने कहा, जो समझौते इस यात्रा के दौरान किए जाएंगे, टेक्निकल एग्रीमेंट जो है वाइट शिपिंग इंफॉर्मेशन के शेयरिंग को लेके, ये एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण समझौता है जो कि सागर विजन को और आगे ले जाने में हमारी मदद करेगा. I think that's it.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of this press briefing. Thank you very much. Please keep following us for more updates on the upcoming visit. Thank you. Good evening, friends. I welcome you to this special briefing by Secretary West, Sri Tanmay Lal, on the visit of the President of European Commission, who is also accompanied by the College of Commissioners. We have with us on the dais, accompanying Secretary West, Ambassador of India to the European Union, Belgium and Luxembourg, Sri Saurabh Kumar. We are also joined by Additional Secretary Europe West in the Ministry of External Affairs, Sri Piyush Srivastav. With that, I give the floor over to Secretary West for his initial remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, the President of the European Commission, Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, accompanied by the College of Commissioners, are on official visit to India, as you all know. The 22 of the commissioners are part of the EC delegation, and this is really an unprecedented and a landmark visit on many counts. This is one of the first such visits by the college in its new mandate, and the first which has been outside Europe, and their new mandate, of course, began in December 2024. This visit signals the high priority that is attached by both sides to the strategic partnership that we share. And the visit of the entire college also highlights the very extensive breadth of our partnership and engagement. President von der Leyen met Prime Minister Modi, and the two leaders held extensive discussions, including in the delegation level talks. In addition to these talks, there have been 20 individual ministerial meetings since yesterday, again something very unprecedented, where the College of Commissioners have met their counterpart ministers. These other meetings have included meetings of the bilateral cluster, the three meetings of the ministerial level for the three working groups of the Trade and Technology Council, and the Trade and Technology Council Ministerial itself. 20 cabinet ministers and ministers of state from India also participated in the delegation level talks today. The themes covered in these bilateral ministerial engagements, in addition to the trade and FTA and digital green technologies to supply chains under the TTC, Some of the other themes that were discussed were ranging from finance to renewable energy to environment, research and innovation to skilling and education, space to defense, connectivity and mobility, sustainable urbanization to water to fisheries, women empowerment to youth. So this really gives an idea of how extensive and broad-ranging the discussions were held at ministerial level, and this explains the breadth of our strategic partnership that we share. I would like to share some of the program elements briefly. Yesterday, upon arrival, President von der Leyen was received at the airport by Honorable Minister of State for Health and Family Welfare, Srimati Anupriya Patel, and was accorded a ceremonial reception and a cultural welcome. Thereafter, she visited Rajghat to pay tributes to Mahatma Gandhi. External Affairs Minister had called on the President von der Leyen last evening. Today, the plenary meetings were followed by a banquet lunch hosted by the Prime Minister in honor of President von der Leyen and the College of Commissioners. And later this evening, the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, will host a business event with leaders of industry, and they will also host a dinner for the delegation. Earlier today, the President von der Leyen, she experienced the digital payment transaction, UPI, at one of the venues. And the College of Commissioners also traveled by the hydrogen bus to the venue. These two areas, of course, digital transformation and green energy transition, are areas where India is developing our capabilities very quickly. And also these are areas, some of the key areas where India and EU are collaborating very closely. Among the outcomes, there has been a leader's statement, which will be, I understand, will be issued shortly. It highlights the important context of the visit and the significance, and also the guidance that has been provided by the leaders to their teams to take the strategic partnership forward in very, very substantial ways. Some of the key outcomes relate to trade, investment, technology, mobility, connectivity, defense, and these broad themes. In a major outcome, the leaders have directed their teams that the India-EU FTA should be concluded within the year. This is, of course, a very important outcome, as negotiations have been ongoing on this aspect. There has also been very clear progress on the different working groups under the Trade and Technology Council. These working groups, just to refresh your memory, the themes are from strategic technologies, digital governance and digital connectivity, that is working group 1. Then green and clean energy technologies, and that is the working group 2. And trade, investment and resilient value chains is the theme of the working group 3. And there has been very extensive discussions and progress in all three of these tracks. On technology further, there has been progress in the implementation of the MOU on semiconductors, from boosting supply chains to facilitating talent exchange and skilling. And also there has been MOU between the Bharat 6G Alliance and EU 6G Smart Networks and Service Industry Associations, and extensive discussions were held on taking these cooperation forward. There is also a deepening collaboration between the India AI Mission and the European AI Office. On clean and green energy, there is joint funding been announced of 60 million euros for research projects ranging from electric vehicles to plastics, marine plastics, and also to projects on waste to energy, especially to green hydrogen. There has been progress on the third phase of the work plan on clean energy and climate partnership that India and EU share. An India-EU Green Hydrogen Forum will be held, and India-EU Business Summit on offshore wind energy is also planned. Another area of collaboration, important collaboration, has been connectivity. And in that sphere, both sides discussed the significance of the IMEC connectivity initiative and various ways to take this forward. On the defense and security domain, especially maritime security, the EU has decided to join India's Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, IPOI, and EU is also joining as an observer or a dialogue partner in the IORA initiative. There was also discussions and cooperation on improving maritime domain awareness, especially the cooperation between fusion centers in terms of sharing information. Similar cooperation was discussed between the Indian Navy and the Operation Aspides of European Union. There was also discussion on how India could join projects under the EU's Permanent Structured Cooperation, which is called the PESCO, EU's Security and Defense Program. It was also decided to hold focused discussions on defense industrial partnerships going forward. And India-EU space dialogue will be launched soon. And both sides also decided to pursue trilateral cooperation projects both in Africa and also in the Indo-Pacific region. This area has been another important area of collaboration, since both India and EU have extensive development partnership program across various geographies, and both sides have now decided to pursue such cooperation projects. The leaders' statement and the Trade and Technology Council joint statement will be shared with you. I would like to add some more on the recent interactions that have been held between the two sides, and some of the background information relating to the extent of our partnership. Among the recent interactions, of course, last Friday, External Affairs Minister had met the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, HRVP, Ms. Kaya Kallas, in Johannesburg on the sidelines of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. Last month, Commerce and Industry Minister had traveled to Brussels to hold detailed talks on talks with the EU Trade Commissioner, Maros Sefcovic, who was also part of the college visiting currently. Prime Minister Modi and President von der Leyen have met 7 times earlier, both in terms of bilateral settings, but also multilateral settings, for example, G7 and G20 meetings. This was the 3rd visit of President von der Leyen to India as the EC President. Her previous visits were in September 2023 during the G20 summit, and earlier in April 2022 in a standalone bilateral visit. In recent months, for example, if we just look at last 18 months, there have been more than 110 interactions at the head of state, head of government, and ministerial level between India and Europe. This is a very, very substantial number, of course, and it shows the extent of the intensifying and diversifying engagement between India and countries and regions of Europe and member states of the EU. Between India and EU, there are 30 bilateral institutional dialogue mechanisms which meet regularly at the senior official level. Our strategic partnership is completing 20 years. It was started in 2004, and now the two sides, the two leaders, have decided to accelerate and elevate this partnership further. The trade, technology, talent, innovation, investment, green transition, defense production, security, and resilient supply chains are some of the key areas of our strategic partnership. India's largest trading partner in goods is the European Union. The trade in goods has nearly doubled over the last decade to reach a figure of US $135 billion, and the figure has grown 3 times over the past 2 decades. Trade in services stands at around $53 billion. EU is a major investment partner for India. EU's collective FDI into India is nearly $120 billion since the year 2000. And India's investment into the EU is also growing, and it is now estimated at around US dollars 40 billion. If we look at the business cooperation, there are an estimated 6,000 companies from EU countries which have active business presence in India. And similarly, around 1,200 Indian companies are estimated to have business presence in EU countries. So this is a very, very substantial trade, investment, and business partnership that we share. Another very important element is the people-to-people contact. The Indian diaspora in the European Union continues to grow. It is estimated at around 1.65 million currently. And this includes 120,000 Indian students as estimated. So these are some of the numbers that give you the extent of the close strategic partnership that we share. And as I mentioned, in the outcomes today, the areas were really trade in terms of the announcement on the timelines for FTA, the concrete progress achieved in the Trade and Technology Council among various technology tracks ranging from artificial intelligence to semiconductors to quantum computing, high-performance quantum computing, the connectivity relating to IMEC initiative, the EU's joining of IPOI, Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, the push on green hydrogen, and the furthering of cooperation in the sphere of space cluster. So these are some of the areas that have that are really taking this strategic partnership forward. And as I mentioned, this has been really historic and unprecedented in terms of the range of interactions that were held at the same time at the leaders level and also at the ministerial level, with 22 commissioners from the EU traveling to India and 20 ministers taking part in the delegation level talks, and also 20 bilateral meetings over the last 1.5 days. So this will be completing my initial briefing.
We are now open for questions. Okay, so Ayushi first. We'll take three questions.
So this is Ayushi from MEA. I just wanted to know how much was Russia-Ukraine discussed between the two leaders, and also was there any discussion on the enforcement of sanctions, enforcement of EU sanctions on Russia?
Mm-hmm. Sudhi.
Sir, thank you. Sudhiranjan from Bloomberg. Two questions, sir. One, in the free trade agreement, when setting the date, did the two leaders or the two sides have any discussion on spirits, motor vehicles export? Because that is one of the issues that has been stalling this entire issue. And if so, has there been any commitment from either side to look into it? And on the IMEC, sir, was Israel-Gaza war discussed, and any chance of relooking at the routing of IMEC?
Shubham.
Hi, sir, Shivam from Reuters. Was the carbon border mechanism discussed at all in terms of the EU, and could there be any possibility of any flexibility for India in that? That's, yeah.
Elena, you had a question?
Yes, good afternoon. Elena, TASS News Agency. I wonder in what form European side raised the issue of sanctions. And as we saw in the media, there were a lot of publications with the reference to European sources that during this visit, the delegation from EU will raise this issue, sanctions against Russia. So in what form does the European side raise this issue, and how do you react to their form of... So do you feel some kind of pressure from their side on this particular issue?
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir. we'll come back for more questions. You can take these questions.
Okay, so CBAM. Well, CBAM, of course, is a concern for a large number of countries, especially in the global south. We have highlighted our concerns to our EU partners on a number of occasions. We have also noted that the EU has made some modifications to a CBAM framework to simplify some of the aspects. And we are examining the implications of that. And we hope that the concerns of the developing country partners will be taken into account and addressed suitably in any such scheme. On the FTA, of course, the two sides discussed there was a ministerial separate meeting, and also the main talks. The emphasis was on how to get the FTA done quickly, and there was a clear political commitment and agreement to do it quickly. And that is also reflected in the directions that were given by the leaders to the two sides. On IMEC, yes, IMEC, both sides strong interest in pursuing the project, which will bring together the India and Europe in a major connectivity route. And the discussion was how to take this forward, despite the problems that may be being faced at the moment. There is also progress going on in different aspects of IMEC at the same time. In any meeting of global leaders, the issues of international global interests of mutual concern and mutual interest are discussed. And relating to the issue, your question about sanctions, no, that was not discussed.
Okay. Siddhant?
Hi, so Siddhant from Beyond. How much was the issue of cross-border terrorism, that basically means terrorism from Pakistan, being discussed? Because earlier today, at an address in Delhi, she mentioned about that. And second question, how much the focus or emphasis was on China during the talks?
Rishikesh?
Sir, Rishikesh from PTI. So, was there any discussion held on threat posed by Chinese equipment, and is there any consensus on how India and EU can reduce the dependency on Chinese products, especially as President has mentioned that we should promote the dependable supply chain?
Ram Prakash?
सर ब्रह्म प्रकाश दुबे न्यूज़ इंडिया से। मेरा सवाल है कि वीज़ा को लेकर जो डिस्कशन हुआ है भारत और यूयू के बीच, वो किस तरह का डिस्कशन हुआ है, किस तरह का बेनिफिट होगा, क्योंकि स्टूडेंट्स को बहुत सारी परेशानी जाती है अभी खासतौर से यूरोपियन कंट्रीज़ में वीज़ा लेने के लिए। थैंक यू।
केशव?
Thank you, sir. Keshav Padmanabhan from the Print. Two questions. One, when you say that regional and global issues were discussed, were there any pointed discussions on the situation in our neighborhood with regards to Bangladesh? Was any of this raised at the political level with the European Union? And secondly, when we talk about the free trade agreement, we've heard a lot about the EU's concerns, wine, spirits, automobiles. Can you give us a sense of what are India's concerns when it comes to tariffs, especially the EU's protectionism with regards to its own agricultural market? So can you sort of give us a sense of what India's issues with EU's FTA, with this FTA is? Thank you.
Rishabh?
Hello. Good evening, Secretary. Rishabh from Times. So just a related question. A senior EU official has mentioned that without agreement on cars, wines and spirits, an FTA is very unlikely. So they are pushing for tariff cut on import of car, wines and spirit. So are we ready to accommodate it, and where is the negotiation right now? Because this has been a constant message coming in from Brussels that India needs to cut tariff on these issues. A and B, so, as Siddhant asked, on cross-border terrorism, there have been a lot of discussion between India and EU on terrorism. Was there any concrete thing, given that we are also talking about a roadmap from 2025?
Sir. Thank you. I think several questions on FTA. See, if I mentioned recently, last month, Commerce and Industry Minister had traveled to Brussels, where he held talks with his counterpart, Trade Commissioner Sefcovic. Trade Commissioner is here, part of the EU delegation. The next round of the talks are also due soon. There is extensive and very intense negotiation going on, and the political direction is clear. Now, I would not like to go into the details on individual products. That is for the negotiators to resolve. But both sides have agreed that this is an important FTA. It has to be done quickly, and it has to be done in a balanced and a mutually beneficial and equitable manner. The question on visas. There are regular discussions on visa and consular issues between India and EU. This was also discussed during this visit. Last year, the EU had announced a Schengen cascade visa scheme that is aimed at facilitating longer term visas for frequent travelers from India. And separately, India and EU member states have also been discussing what are known as the mobility and migration agreements to facilitate the growing legal pathways for our professionals, skilled workers who are increasingly in demand in EU countries, and also students. So many of these things are already being done. India and EU also has a separate mechanism, I mean not only the individual countries, but India and EU, which is called the CAMM, and there again many of these issues are taken up. There is a clear agreement that this is a mutually beneficial area, and we must try and explore ways where trained talent can, find a facilitated pathway from India to Europe because of the requirements and how the European technology and Indian talent can match each other. So there have been very positive discussions on this sector. And you may know that mobility partnership agreements have India and some other countries in the EU have already signed up. We have done agreements with Germany, France, Italy, Portugal, Austria, and Denmark, who are among the EU members. So this is a very active area of discussion and cooperation going forward. India is also the largest recipient of their Blue Card scheme and the scholarships, for example, under the Erasmus framework. So we are very much looking forward to further facilitation of this area, which is in mutual interest. The supply chains and the resilient supply chains has been a very important area of discussion between India and the European Union. And as I mentioned, the Working Group 3 from the Trade and Technology Council actually focuses on these aspects. So yes, the resilience, how to make the supply chains resilient, what will it imply for various technology sectors, manufacturing sectors in different areas, engineering, defense, so many other aspects was discussed and is being taken forward very, very strongly by both sides. Yes, terrorism was discussed. It is an important area when we discuss the security issues, and they form an important aspect of our discussions. Both sides are very conscious of the need for deepening cooperation in controlling and combating terrorism, including its financing, and they collaborate at various platforms individually and in a multilateral context to take this cooperation forward. I think I have covered the questions.
Yeah. We'll take some more questions. So John there.
Thank you. John Reed from the FT. Ms. von der Leyen spoke about setting a deadline by both sides of concluding the FTA by the end of this year. Can you confirm that that's indeed India's goal as well? And if so, is that a realistic goal, given all the issues that divide the two sides? Thank you.
Raghavendra.
Raghavendra Verma from ZDF German Television. My question is also regarding FTA. So has something changed in the last few years, or that brings the confidence between the two sides that it will be easier to conclude? Recently there have been these tariff disruptions from the United States. Does it make it easier or difficult for the two countries, two partners to conclude this FTA? And so there are specific, you have not gone into the specifics of the products, but these products are aligned to many of the member countries in the EU. Is India also discussing such issues with the individual countries in the EU to make this faster and happen? And lastly, sir, India-UK FTA is said to be much easier to sign than the India-EU, and that has also not happened for so long, sir. Is there any progress on that? Is it really happening soon also?
We have a question right behind here.
Alexander Besuk, Российская газета Russia. I was wondering, has the Ukrainian conflict come up during the negotiations, specifically in the context of US-Russian negotiations that had taken place recently? And secondly, if I may, since US President Donald Trump has threatened both India and EU with new tariffs, has the issue of US approach towards global trade been discussed? Thank you.
Last question there, Abir.
Sir, this is Ubir from the Tribune. Sir, my question is, you said that this delegation from Europe traveled in this hydrogen bus. Can you please elaborate what was the idea behind it?
Sir.
Okay, so regarding the hydrogen bus, of course, the Thank you. Of course, the idea behind hydrogen bus was to show the extent of work that is ongoing in terms of renewable energy and green technologies, green transition is very much part of India's priorities. We have set very ambitious renewable energy targets, and green hydrogen will form a very important sector in our pathway towards those targets. And that is also one of the areas where Europe and India, EU and India, have a lot of expertise, technology, collaboration to share, which is ongoing. And this shows both the growing capabilities in terms of technology, its use for, in this case, public mobility in India, and the interest, this being an area of interest for both the sides. So that was the idea behind the bus ride. On the FTA, of course, the negotiations have been ongoing with when you have two large economies, two very diverse economies, and on one side EU, which comprises of 27 member states. The negotiations will take time, but there has been a clear determination and clear decision by the leaders today that the FTA has to be finalized within the year. So there is no doubt upon that. This is also reflected in the leader's statement. And as you mentioned, it was also mentioned during the press remarks done by the leaders. So there is a clear direction available now, which is always helpful when the negotiators meet. It helps resolve many difficult questions sometimes, and we are very confident that this will be done. in terms of your question regarding various products, etc., that is a given. I mean, there are different concerns for both sides, always are in any negotiation, especially in trade negotiations. But as I said, now the decisive, clear mandate has been given by the leaders to their teams. On other global issues, as I mentioned, the global issues of mutual interest are always part of the discussions. But if you really see, this visit has been about the strategic partnership between India and EU and how to both elevate it and accelerate it going forward by the two sides. Just if you see the extent of the bilateral meetings that took place, 20 ministerial bilateral meetings, 20 ministers and 22 commissioners being there during the talks. So the focus was clearly and very firmly on what India and EU are doing together and what we can do together and how we can further deepen this partnership going forward. So that was the focus of this visit.
Thank you, sir. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the close of this press briefing. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Sujeev. It's a great pleasure for me to be back in Kathmandu after 11 years. It's been too long. Every time I visit, I wonder why we aren't here more often. We really should get a lot of our young scholars. This is such an important country for us. We think we know you, but there is so much we need to do. And part of the reason I'm here is also to foster a relationship between scholars of the two countries. As someone who's been working in public policy now for 21 years, for me, the new Nepal Economic Forum becomes an important platform and a gateway for the scholars. I'm currently with the Economic Advisory Council. We sit within the Niti Aayog, which is the think tank of the government. But there is a very large and thriving community of think tanks in India. Many of them are young, which makes them extremely agile. The interests are very wide. We're looking at environment, we're looking at connectivity. In fact, I've tried to bring in a lot of data even in the international relations and the foreign policy side of scholarship while I was at Brookings for 10 years. My core interest, however, is India and the neighborhood. Part of my job when I was invited was to give you a sense of how the Indian economy is transforming. Over and beyond a handful of macro indicators that you talk about all the time, the media talks about all the time, I'm here to really give you a snapshot of a very broad range of the real economy. And by real, I mean as against merely the financial sector or the size of the economy. And before I begin to do that, I do want to spend a minute on Bibek. I've had the great opportunity to work with him as a part-time member in the Economic Advisory Council when it was formed under Modi administration in 2017. I was a part-time member then. I was younger, I was more impatient, and it took someone like Bibek to really guide me and mentor me to really understand how things function within the government and how do you get government and the administration to open windows to accept research insights. Traditionally, I think it's by nature, bureaucracy is conservative, and it's the case definitely in India. Despite the political big movements and the aspirations themselves which are exploding, bureaucracy has its own pace of life. And researchers sometimes do feel frustrated. But I think what Bibek taught me in the last 8-9 years is that, we have to be prepared with our insight and the research itself with the ideas, preferably in a translational format, in an application format. And when the window of opportunity opens, we are ready to plug these ideas in. Because dynamic economies like India, Nepal, in fact, the entire neighborhood, are opening in ways which aren't always predictable. There are new windows of opportunity opening, and I think as scholars, the job really becomes one of having good, thorough ideas prepared and ready to just plug in. So I do think that the time is right for scholars to rise and shine and to publish, particularly I think across disciplines and across countries. I will give you a snapshot of some of that. One small comment on Vivek's scholarship, Sujeev, that we often forget is, while he translated tons and tons of Sanskrit texts, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and so on, as an elder and as a mentor, there is a lot of knowledge which is not documented. Have patience. He's a good person, but don't always trust him. This person will tend to sit on the file. These are things that nobody else really prepares you for, and this is where it matters to have a research community, to have a scholarly community which builds on existing. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants here. So he was a giant, and many of us in the economic and the public policy realm of India and modern Indian policy making, we are definitely going to miss him tremendously. So thank you for remembering him, and thank you for getting me here. I'll start first with why growth. Now, this is particularly for a lot of my European friends, and when I visit Europe, I hear about degrowth. I hear about, yes, issues of sustainability can be addressed if we grow slowly, or there is a concept of degrowing. Let me make it very clear. In India, growth is non-negotiable. We have to grow. We have just come out of poverty. So for us, we are still under $3,000 per capita per year, which means growth for us is an absolute necessity. To give you an idea of where we are, just 48 years back, really 2 generations, an average South Korean, an average Chinese, and an average Indian had the same per capita income. Today, South Korea is 12 times richer and China is 4.5 times richer in per capita terms. None of these are forces of nature. They don't just happen. Growth is an outcome of deliberate policy making and reforms. So growth is not something that is random and that just happens. It is very much an outcome of what we do. And that's the larger message when we look at growth and compare with some of our fast-growing countries within Asia. This is, of course, India, per capita income of India, and it's a very impressive trajectory. The reflex answer to the question, when did India's exponential growth phase start? The reflex answer that most economists also tend to give is 1991, when we began to liberalize. However, that is not the case. That is the time when we began to dismantle the core license permit Raj. We had an extremely inhibiting, extremely limiting economic regime where private enterprise to a large extent was inhibited by the policies, and the government was a very active player. In 91, we began to dismantle the license permit Raj, but the inflection point is around 2000. So the lesson is that it takes a little while after you change the rules for growth to pick up. That's number one. But number two, merely changing the rules doesn't do the trick. You need the government to make large capital expenditure in very important sectors like infrastructure. It was in late 1990s and 2000, it was really the Vajpayee regime around which we saw connecting every nook and cranny of the country through major highway networks. We saw privatization of airlines. We saw power sector reform, when India went from being a power deficient country to becoming a power surplus country. We saw the telecom reforms. Of course, what people remember today are the scams and so on, but we often forget how revolutionary the reforms within the telecom sector was. We used to wait 6 months to get a telephone connectivity. Now, on average, an Indian citizen, let's say in Delhi, Bombay, has 2 phones or perhaps 3. Every household has multiple. So this trajectory is not very old, but it is now consistent. India continues to be the fastest growing major economy in the world since the pandemic. And every year, the IMF projections, the OECD projections, the World Bank projections, they're all projecting India in ways that it often needs to be corrected, and the corrections are always upwards. So in fact, if anything, we are far more conservative than the true dynamic nature of the economy itself. But not to be over-reliant on GDP as a metric, we should look at the human development metric as well. Human development looks at indicators of health, education, gender. And this is when you compare India with China here. Unlike in the economic growth, where we are roughly 20 to 22 years behind China, in terms of the human development indicators, it's almost like a parallel line. Here, the horizontal difference tells you how many years behind. We are roughly 8 years behind China. And that itself is a very important thing to note, that while economically we are 22 years, why is it that developmentally we are doing relatively better? And I think the democratic structure of the country, the fact that we have elections which cannot be won if you ignore development altogether. Whether it's a federal level, so central government elections, whether it is a panchayat election, every election, development and indicators of local development become a very important electoral tool. Of course, that might have its own bag of problems where you have too much populist moves. But this, in fact, the outcome is that development in India is happening at a far more rapid pace. If you look at the world poverty clock, it's remarkable that despite the pandemic, we remained one of the few major countries which continued to be on the target to achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 1, which is reduction of absolute poverty, right? Today, this is the latest data as of spring of 2024. India's absolute poverty is now below 3%. And we have all grown up studying the slogan, Garibi Hatao. Everyone talks of poverty in India, but it has taken us this long, and therefore we are at a very historic time window when India has actually managed to reduce absolute poverty below 3%. It truly is a historic achievement. Of course, a lot of it is on the back of rapid economic growth. The other point to note is far richer countries, South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, many of them are going to miss the SDG 1 target on account of COVID. So it's not how much wealth or how wealthy the country is. It's how the economic progress takes everyone along. That's why we care so much about poverty. So we are far poorer than these richer countries, which are 3x, 4x per capita GDP. But we have managed to attain SDG 1, which is below 3% absolute poverty. If you look at maternal mortality rate, which is yet another important metric to look at, the number of mothers who die during childbirth, India's reduction of maternal mortality rate is more than twice as fast as the global average. So the orange bars are the maternal mortality rate for the global economy, and the blue bars are for India. This again is happening, of course, largely on the back of economic growth, but remember, it's a very large country. Many of our SDGs are not all India level problems anymore. 10 states in India have already attained the IMR, the infant mortality and the maternal mortality. So we have concentrated 6 states or 7 states where this problem persists. So we are really in the realm of what we call precision policy making now. That's why you'll hear of aspirational districts. You'll hear of aspirational blocks. There are very few big all India level goals of this nature. This is infant mortality rate. The size of the ball indicates the size of the population. These are states of India. You'll see the poorest states on the right-hand side, the southern states in the middle, and on the left you'll see the rest. You see every state of the country, and on the y-axis you have per capita GDP. With economic growth in every state, infant mortality rate is really crashing. The biggest increases are in poor states like Odisha, Bihar, UP, etc. For us, this is what economic growth is. Sometimes when you pick up the newspapers and you hear India is getting intolerant, violent, and so on, as economists, we really look for objective measures to look at these things. So you study riots. A riot is a variable which is very well defined, and it doesn't change over time. A riot is a violent episode which involves 5 or more people for a common purpose, and it gets registered in the local police station. If you see since the 50s and 60s, India in the late 80s and early 90s used to see more than 1 lakh, which is more than 100,000 riots a year. Do you see the structural decline since economic growth started? And as economists, of course, there are lots of theory, but a very compelling one is that the opportunity cost of street violence has now increased. So it's not that we have started doing policing particularly well, or we've started spending a lot more on policing. We've had various kinds of reforms even within the police, but that's not the story. The story here is the tolerance for a lot of street violence has come down. So you are seeing that the number of riots, in fact, today, India is far more peaceful than we have been in the last 50 years if you just measure riots. Of course, we are all on cell phones, and one riot is one too many. We are a highly hyper-connected world today, but objectively, if you see, far, far more peaceful. If you see crime against women, these are all the states, you see that rapes, again, because it's well-defined, the definitions don't change with time, you're seeing there's been a structural break. Around 2016-17, most states, though not all, have seen a structural break in terms of number of rapes. These are BJP states, Congress states, RJD states, JDU states, regardless of the political parties. And one very compelling research that came out was published in The Lancet, which showed that it was the building of 120 million rural toilets, which led to a reduction of 22% in assaults on women and 14% reduction in rapes, or reported rapes. So the toilets, which were built because many of us argued for why open defecation has direct impact with health and public health metrics, has had a very important unintended consequence. It has had on safety of women and girls. And that's the nature of policy making, that we push for a particular intervention based on certain insights, certain empirical truths, facts, what we find across the developing world, maybe developed world. But there are many other aspects to these interventions which are quite unintended. So today what you're seeing, and particularly in rural India, is safety for girls and women has gone up on account of these. Toilets have been a very major scheme. Now, in terms of self-reliance, because you do hear Make in India, self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar, that's the Hindi term for it, which means self-reliance. There are some sectors which are of strategic interest to us, in which we want to be self-reliant. We do not want to be over-dependent on any other power. Food is the first. What you notice is in terms of the food production index, that's the left-hand side panel, 100, it measures of the amount and the food that you eat, how much do you produce. We used to be barely 23, 30. Today we are 126, which means we are producing far more than what we are consuming. In terms of basic cereals, India has a problem of abundance today. We are trying to now diversify away from cereals towards other kind of crops. And so we are also looking at the nutritional outcomes. How does the minimum support price, etc., how do you alter cropping pattern, right? So today, we are self-sufficient as far as food is concerned. If you look at the second panel, it tells you what fraction of our imports is food. 1/3 of our imports used to be food just 40, 50 years back. Today, it's around 2.3%. It'll never be zero, remember, because we are a connected country. We are a country which is increasingly opening to the rest of the world. We have lots of trade and investment treaties with many, many countries. We will never be zero because we are not insular. We have a community. In fact, you should think of the Indian economy as having the size and scale of a Germany combined with 2 sub-Saharan Africa. Which means there is a cohort, there is a demographic which consumes like Germany, which travels like Germany, which adopts technology like Germany. So we do like our Swiss cheeses in New Zealand, milk products and etc. So it'll never be zero. We're not going back to pre-1991 phase, right? But our domestic economy, unlike China, is a strategic asset for us. Unlike a repressed domestic demand, which becomes particularly vulnerable to global turmoils, that's why you're seeing the slowdown in China, also on account of global, but there are other reasons, overcapacity, etc. For us, the Indian economy, domestic demand is a very, very important factor. And that's why you see that the impact of global turmoil is relatively less on Indian economy compared to the Chinese, or most other emerging markets for that matter. Now, if you look at energy, oil, and this will perhaps help you appreciate why our foreign policy has been shaped almost entirely on what our needs are, domestic needs are. Again, I reiterate, we have just come out of poverty. We have great need for high economic growth over the next several decades, hence non-negotiable. What you see is the per capita consumption in energy is just shooting up. In fact, now it has totally escalated. That's what a poor, fast-growing economy looks like. Our energy consumption is shooting. But if you look at what fraction of our energy consumed is imported, and we compare ourselves with 3 major economies like China and the US, you're seeing that in the case of Chinese, their energy dependence has stabilized around 13-14% over the last several years now. The US, since shale, of course, but strategically now they're weaning themselves away from over-dependence on imports for energy needs. So you're seeing now it's down to single digits. It's around 6.5, 6.7, I think. In India, if you see the imported segment of our energy, we are around 33% of our energy is really imported. That's very high, and it shows no sign of slowing down. Hence, our energy security is going to dictate a lot of our stance. You know, manufacturing, I must confess, we have had a complete 180-degree reorientation. If you were in Delhi 10 years back, the common phrase you would hear people in Delhi speak is that India has missed the manufacturing bus. Because China is doing so much of it and they're competitive, we're not going to be able to keep up. But since the Modi administration has come in, there's been, of course, a lot of research and of course, the world today is a new world if you look at what's happening across. We see resurgence of what we call industrial policy in most developed countries of the world. And industrial policy really is euphemism for saying, look, we want our manufacturing jobs back. And the government is going to spend money and resources and strategically get a lot of these manufacturing capabilities back home. Because we have realized after much turmoil globally that manufacturing sector is not just about producing something cheaply. It's also about livelihoods. It's about jobs. And the kind of upheaval we are seeing in Western Europe and in the US on account of loss of manufacturing jobs, we clearly want to avoid that. That's number one. Number two, as China loses its competitive advantage in terms of rising labor costs, and of course a slowdown overall, India begins to emerge as that second large market with this massive labor surplus, which has the capability to plug into this next phase. But remember, while China's growth in manufacturing was backed by the OECD market, the rest of the world continues to grow. Africa is growing, Latin America is growing, Asia is growing. And the demand for manufactured items, and I'm not talking about the extremely high-tech, even simple manufactured items, is continuing to rise. And we do need another engine. And India is well poised to do that. But remember, it's a large country. We have many states, and states are very powerful in India. A federal structure becomes then a very important factor when you begin to understand manufacturing capability within India. Then, of course, we have 500 million people whom we have to move out of agriculture. So manufacturing therefore becomes of strategic interest. Services is not going to be able to employ such a large number. While services remains the fastest growing and the engine of growth for the Indian economy, strategically manufacturing becomes very, very important. So there has been a complete reorientation. Therefore, schemes like PLI and Make in India Defense, privatization, opening up of the space sector, opening up of almost all sectors in the economy today to private investments and foreign direct investments. On connectivity, it's a new India. If you consider that in the last 10 years, every Indian now has a bank account, an Aadhaar, which is a biometric electronic ID, and mobile access. So we are a networked economy, quite unlike what we were 10 years back. And some of the fastest growing sectors, ag tech, health tech, ed tech, right? The entire startup space is all backed or all serviced on this core architecture, which is digitized India. The fact that every Indian is part of this network today. You hear the government side of the story, which is that we do welfare far better now and more efficiently because the leakages have come down. In fact, the leakages have come down and the savings are in tune of 1.5% of India's GDP. That's what we are saving by plugging leakages and doing direct benefit transfer where the government puts money into the bank account of the beneficiary. But that's the government side of the story. The more vibrant and really the fascinating side is the private sector. The fact that every Indian is now networked and has bank account and has mobile connectivity means there is a very large segment of the economy where there is tremendous trial and error, experimentation we've never seen before. And I often joke that, when we were in colleges, the cool kids had bands and you had a guitar and you sang. Not anymore. The cool kids have startups. So if you go to the business schools, you have incubators and they're so well connected. The financing is coming in so smoothly. You have specialized institutions which are looking at incubating these kind of startups across different sectors of the economy: health, education, infrastructure. So it's a great new economy backed by this. The fastest growing e-commerce segment is not Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, Chennai. It's Lucknow, Raipur, right? It's all these smaller parts. It's basically because Indians are now part of the network. If you look at any amenity, and this is a conscious government decision, that every basic amenity is now going to be available to all Indians everywhere. We call this the saturation policy, which includes electrification, piped drinking water, of course toilets, bank account, mobile connectivity. This basket keeps expanding. But what you see is there is no difference in terms of improvements across different socioeconomic groups. You can look at Hindu households, Muslim households, OBCs, SCSTs, whatever. And mind you, this is not government data. These are survey data. More than 12 lakh households. These are self-reported data from households. So the improvements are tremendous. It's a large economy where not every state is growing at the same pace. That's why you will hear stories like Punjab. So Punjab is the dark black line. You see the entire neighborhood of Punjab is growing much, much faster. Haryana today is nearly 3 times richer than Punjab. So the whole country is not growing together. There are very, very big variations across, right? India is again very large. There is no north-south divide as far as wealth is concerned. This is a dynamic graph where every green dot indicates 1,000 rich households, a yellow dot indicates 1,000 middle-class household, and a red dot indicates 1,000 poor households. What you notice, though, is you can draw a line from Srinagar to Kanyakumari. India has an east-west divide as far as growth and wealth is concerned. Our poverty is, by and large, an eastern phenomenon. While industrialization and rapid growth is happening if you look at the entire Western belt, because historically that has been the more industrialized areas. Industrialization begets further industrialization and experimentation. This is where a very large amount of modern industries, etc., are coming in. A lot of our national policies, therefore, you cannot have a national rural employment guarantee scheme in Bihar and Assam, which looks the same as it does in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Nobody is willing to till land for a minimum price in Gujarat and Maharashtra. But it works perfectly fine in Assam and Bihar. So a lot of our national schemes, therefore, like I said, we are getting into precision policy making now. Very few all India level simple schemes. Labor force participation rising, though not as fast as we would like. It's rising for all cohorts, men and women. If you look at overall unemployment rate, of course, it's declining. It's around 3.8 as of the latest number. We do have a problem of youth unemployment. The second panel is of people under the age of 30. It's again a global phenomenon. The OECD euphemistically calls it youth inactivity, which means young people are not ready to settle down into jobs the way we were. They want to wait. They're waiting for the right job. All right? This is very much an Indian phenomenon as well. If you look at satellite data, alternate forms of data, which is not government or self-reported, but just how much of growth is happening, you see the red parts are places where you have growth beyond 5. The average there is around 10% growth year on year. Do you see how the red part of the country is expanding? So very rapid economic growth happening in some of the poorest regions. In fact, if you see, our entire boundary, Suji, is red. So some of the fastest growing segments of the Indian market is the boundaries along Nepal. And this is the great opportunity. We have to think of how do we use this connectivity which is within and across states within India to basically bolster the same across the border with Nepal. I will end on something called narrative economics. As an economist, my job is also to introduce you to certain areas of economics which are no longer within the realm of corporate finance. In corporate finance, we used to study narrative economics, which is firms would plant stories. They would plant stories about themselves, and they would plant stories about rivals, because it had direct impact on the share price. So while something which was very common in corporate finance, now there is a book that Robert Shiller has written from Harvard called Narrative Economics, and we are applying it now to geoeconomics. And I'm presenting here a story from a Brookings paper that we wrote 1 year into the pandemic. The story here begins at the beginning of the pandemic, and the data, this is open source data from Google. It's called the GDELT data. It measures tone of global media. So more than 100 languages. So you have several 100 million data points in this graph. That's why these are so interesting. What you notice is that these are natural language processing which measures whether the news is positive or negative. How negative, how positive. And what you notice at the beginning of the pandemic, all these countries, and I'm looking at, of course, India, China, the US, Sweden, because Sweden was the unique country which did not have a lockdown, remember, and Germany. What you notice is all the countries are getting negative global coverage, because that's the job of the media. The job of the media is to tell sad stories and break bad news. But what you have seen since the pandemic within a year is that there is now a great divergence happening in global media. This is not Indian media, this is not Chinese media, this is not US media, this is global media. All the media that Google has, right, in more than 100 languages. What you notice is the democracies in the world continue to get negative coverage. Again, that's what free press does. What you see with respect to global coverage of China, quite remarkably, has not only pulled away from the democracies, global coverage of China and Chinese economy is now positive. This is not censorship within China. So this is not Chinese media being told to put good stories about the Chinese economy or China as a country. This is media in Ecuador, in New Zealand, in Australia, Sri Lanka, across the world, more than 100 languages. This is narrative economics which is taking fold. Right? You can do a lot more with this data. This is a campaign. Of course, what I'm showing you is for these 5 countries, we can do this for many other countries. Data allows you to do a very large amount of research. I will end it by showing you the second slide on the same story, the source of the news. And what you notice is the dark line, the black line at the bottom, that is the most negative news on India. It's coming from sources that are unknown. And it's the same unknown sources which are also planting the most positive sources on China, as you can see on top. The most positive news on China is also coming from unknown sources. Big data, natural language processing, allows you to do a tremendous, I'm just giving you a very broad snapshot of what the real geoeconomics of today looks like. When you pick up a newspaper and you read an article, you cannot take it as face value. And as researchers, part of our effort is to develop capability within universities, but also within government ministries. We are getting data scientists across some of our central universities, and I'm not talking about IITs. We have lots of youngsters that love to do this kind of work. So we're doing a lot of mapping of where are stories coming from. Why are institutions under attack? How is it linked to economic growth? What are the institutions that are particularly vulnerable? Which are the countries which are particularly vulnerable to these kind of narrative economics? Is this only of academic interest? Unfortunately not. Because when you're sitting at the negotiation table, whether it's a trade deal, and you have human rights put up as the counter, you know there's something more happening. I'm not downplaying human rights. As a plural democracy, we have institutions which are meant to safeguard, and we're extremely concerned about issues like that. But data allows you to pick up what used to be confined to the realm of business, today is happening at a global level, and countries are employing what used to be called narrative economics to drive a lot of the narratives on particular countries. Right? And as researchers, our job, this is also a Brookings paper, our job is to continue to just put it out and understand how international relations and trade and economic relations between countries, what are they being driven by? Real factors, but also sometimes manufactured factors. So it's a fascinating new world. I welcome you to this nature of data science, but I also welcome you to read all of these, whatever excites you on this. They're all published papers. They're all available online. They're peer-reviewed articles. And to the younger scholars in the room, I welcome you to join us in furthering some of this research and perhaps, hopefully, also for Nepal. Thank you. Namaskar.
What's your message to all the young Virat Kohlis watching this and young Jemima Rodriguez watching this who'll take the country further?
You know, I'm so glad you used the second name. I think when I watch the women's league, it's like watching a new emerging kind of activity.
You know, Vikings would always invade with the women as well.
Okay, all right.
We need to be Vikings now.
You notice I'm not disputing it. So,
why are you doing this podcast?
You know, I'm doing this podcast, one, because I like you. Huh?
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Jaishankar, the Minister of External Affairs on TRS. Possibly the most requested episode we've had in the longest time because we've done so much geopolitical content and this legend has come up so much on the show that we just had to bring him on TRS. Keep in mind, this is a very short episode. There was a time constraint because of schedules on that particular day. So I couldn't podcast exactly the way I wanted to with Dr. Jaishankar, but it's a beginning. You're going to see an incredible episode of TRS up ahead. Special thanks to MyGov India for making this happen. This is my mid-20s dream to talk to this man, considering how much he's done for the country, considering how he's rewritten the country's branding on a global stage. This was a great icebreaker with the legend. As I said earlier, I was a little nervous to speak to the cabinet ministers, but Dr. Jaishankar made me feel extremely comfortable. That's his actual real life vibe if you're a young, motivated Indian. And that's what this particular episode 1 with Dr. Jaishankar was about. It was about the young, the new, and the motivated India. I hope you enjoy this particular episode. I hope every single young Indian watches this episode because, to be honest, jokes apart, we're living through some intense times and we need to turn to people like Dr. Jaishankar for guidance about the future. So, I'm going to let you slip into the episode. It is a slightly shorter episode. We will come back with a much longer one with Dr. Jaishankar. But for now, enjoy this legendary piece of TRS. Dr. Jaishankar, the most requested podcast possibly that we ever had. How are you and why do you think that is?
Well, I'm good. Been a busy few weeks. But I would say probably people are more interested in foreign policy.
Nowadays.
And maybe they'll come to watch you. So...
I mean, geopolitics is one of those subjects that people have been lapping up only recently, but lapping it up heavily. And you're the poster boy for everything that's happening correct geopolitically for India.
Okay, that's good to know. But in a way, it's natural. Look, what do we do most of the time? You get up in the morning, first thing you do is reach out for your phone, right? And see what is it you missed when you're sleeping. Now, what it's done is it has connected us completely to the world.
Yeah.
And because of the phone, and then you build everything around it, once you start getting used to global content and global comparisons, then, what you eat, what you read, what you think, everything becomes global.
Yeah.
So that's why they call it globalization.
Okay. Simple question for you. Who is Dr. S. Jaishankar, the man? Like that people don't know. I'll tell you why. Right now, you're very popular on shorts and reels for your very aggressive comebacks and your very aggressive responses. And in many ways, I feel like Virat Kohli and yourself are the faces of young India in some ways. This is how young India
There's a slight age difference between us.
No, but you're still the guy young India is like cheering for. When we see you up there talking to all these people from other countries, we're like, yep. That's the response that they should get.
Look, I'm a trained diplomat whose general SOP is, play it cool, sort of don't make too many waves, etc. Now, partly I've transitioned into being a political face, okay? But even, I would say, the diplomatic side of me, which is still very deep, after all, I've done it for 45 years, maybe more now. It's like this, I'm very nice to people who are nice to me. When I get pushed, I think it's natural to push back. And one of the things that has been happening to a bit is in the last year and a half, people have been pushing us a bit, So I feel, it's you brought up Virat Kohli cricket analogy. If you get a few bouncers, you want to do something with it, no?
Hit that pull shot.
Yeah.
Okay. When you say the sentence "when I get pushed," in many ways, your "I get pushed" is actually when India gets pushed,
Absolutely.
and you are the personification of India on a global scale. Keeping that in mind, I want to ask you why PM Modi said that you have adbhut thoughts.
No, not. He didn't exactly say adbhut. I think he said वो अंदरूनी हाँ कि उनको बहुत अनुभव है. Look, to be very frank, we had got off a plane. I was myself a little bit zonked getting off the plane, and he was talking about just outside to a group of supporters, and I guess I didn't ask him after that. Okay. I guess what he was really saying is, look, this guy has watched a lot of people come and go. So he's seen a lot. So maybe you should talk to him and ask him what's different.
What's your gauge?
Or what's different?
Yeah, about you?
No, I don't think it was so much what he was talking about me. He was actually saying that, look, guys, talk to him because he will tell you how much the prime minister's visits have changed, how much foreign policy has changed, how much the country has changed. So it was more his, my thoughts rather than me as a subject that he was talking about. That's my take of it.
I think it's one and the same thing.
Whatever.
Okay. I had Ishant Sharma on the show yesterday.
Oh,
he's a
really?
cricketer.
Okay.
And he spoke about how after a certain point, because you've played so much cricket and you have so many experiences that you've had, your pattern recognition improves. Some people would call pattern recognition intuition or the sixth sense. I am 100% sure that even on a geopolitical scale, there is a role of your sixth sense.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Can you talk a little bit about this? Like a slightly higher level of pattern recognition, or even go one level higher than that? Is there like a spiritual aspect? I mean, I use that word cautiously.
No, look, what happens is this is partly experience, but it's partly also hard work. Any business, we are using a sports, but I would use it in my own line of work. You spend a lot of time reading other players, understanding their game, their play, how does it work, their mind games which they try on you. So you try to see patterns in other people, in other countries, in other other foreign ministries, etc. Just like you do in sports. So in that sense, there's something it's a competitive activity. So if you're going up against a competitor, and I am a very competitive person, okay? I mean, when you ask me that bit, I absolutely let you know. I mean, I try to work out as much of it in sports, but I still have a lot left over for my real business. So if you are a competitive person, all the time your sixth sense, as you call it, is working on your, one part I'm listening to you, but if I've seen you do this before, we've talked before, I've prepared by watching you or studying you before, the sixth sense takes over. So sometimes, when you are in a situation, people sometimes ask you saying, oh, did you think about that line before? I didn't. I mean, that sixth sense takes over at that time because you already kind of, it's moving faster than your mind. And it's actually telling you, okay, they're going to hit you with this. So you're already processing it. So you see that coming at you before it actually comes at you. So I would say it's more like a instinct, right? You called it spirituality. I wouldn't go that far, but
sure.
There you have. But I just want to round off the earlier point. You asked me what did PM mean by that? What has changed? I think one part is we're really living under Prime Minister Modi in a different era. I mean, he has been in many ways personally transformational. He's churned the system in a very, very radical way. I mean, I joined the government when another Gujarati was a prime minister, Morarji Desai. Okay, so that's how far back I go. Huh? A lot of people, your listeners would be wondering, okay, what the hell is he even talking about?
No.
Huh?
You're still the poster boy of young India.
But look, it's not often you get people in any line of business, leave alone in something like running a nation. You can have the big thoughts, the strategic ideas, the grand vision. Very seriously, you have the revolutionary concepts that you chart out, okay, there's a different way of looking at a problem. That's one skill. And then you have going down to the details, saying, okay, this needs to be tweaked, that detail needs to be looked at, this problem needs to be fixed. Guys, you haven't done the backup on this. Usually, there are talented people, inspired people who get the big picture. There are people who are very grounded, who kind of go down, drill down. It's very rare to find it in one person. And that, I would say, to me, is a very singular quality of Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah.
And that makes it very, in a way, very interesting to work with him, but it makes it very challenging because he can challenge you right up there. He can challenge you right down there,
What's your current challenge?
Look, the world's a tough place right now. We barely come out of this COVID thing. You had this Ukraine conflict and all the consequences which came out of it, energy, food, inflation, fertilizer. If we had not handled it well, we actually, the Indian consumer today, the average person, you and me, it would have actually hit us in our pockets. We would have seen much higher inflation. We'd be paying much more for our oil than we are. So I'm actually looking at a world where everything is coming at me at the same time. There's a health issue coming at me. There's an energy issue coming at me. I have a set of border problems on the border areas with the Chinese. I have the pending, the old problem with the Pakistanis who, have been doing terrorism for so long. And at the same time, I'm growing. My people are traveling abroad. And for me, one big part is how, foreign policy is not a kind of a board game or an academic exercise. It actually affects every person. So in my own mind, it's like, how do I get this foreign policy for you personally, right? How do I secure you when you travel? How do I look after you when you get into problems? How do I make sure, if you're a student, that you can work on the side and support yourself? Or that, you don't have to wait for 2.5 years for a visa by a foreign embassy. So it's, as I said, I've also learned, it's the small things, it's the big things, you got to get them both right.
The one truth I've learned about geopolitics is that it's money oriented. If you have the money, it helps you geopolitically. The second truth I've learned is that, and this I've learned in the last 3 days speaking to the cabinet ministers,
all right,
is that the role of entrepreneurs is just do your own thing, create employment, increase the exports of the country, help the country become richer. Would you like to give the youth and especially entrepreneurs any other geopolitical advice when it comes to this? I don't want to use the phrase India versus China, but this whole scenario. How can we help?
No, I think you're smart not using that phrase India versus China for this reason. Yes, we have issues with China, but that's not the only issue. I mean, we have to be fundamentally competitive. If I do not have the factories, if I do not have the as you say, the entrepreneurship, the businesses, the startup, the agriculture, the infrastructure, it's not just the Chinese. The rest of the world will also run over me. So, it is, at the end of the day, there are roughly 200 nations in the world. Okay, maybe about 125, maybe much smaller. Okay, after that, once you start grading them, there will be a zone. Okay, there'll be a zone of countries who constantly compete with each other. They could even be friends. The US and Europe are friends. They compete like hell. Okay, so you'd have a Europe, you'd have an America, Russia, China. Then you add, maybe countries who are economically smaller than us, but they would compete in certain fields. So, I mean, say, for example, you have a Vietnam. Vietnam is a much smaller economy. But the fact is, Vietnam competes when it comes to certain kinds of investment. Okay. So the bottom line, I think what the young people need to know is that today, it is all about building strengths. That when you say make in India, when you say startup India, when you say Gati Shakti, nobody is going to manufacture in India if your infrastructure is lousy. Okay. So they need to see the smart ports, the good roads, the rapid movement of goods. Now, if you have to do all this, if you really need to create jobs, to me, at the end of the day, it's all about creating jobs and opportunities. There are many roads to it. Even foreign policy, I would say, especially foreign policy, is one road, which is our job is also to market India, to brand India, to make India a magnet so that the rest of the world says, okay, these are responsible guys, these are safe guys, let's go and do business. They're not going to steal your stuff.
Okay. Basically chase excellence, create employment.
Absolutely.
And as we move forward in this chase of individual excellence, you will achieve national excellence.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
In the sport of global, in the global sport of geopolitics.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well said.
When you meet one of our rival nations' foreign ministers, like we saw you doing the Namaste to Bilawal Bhutto, what is your interaction with him, which the news doesn't capture, which only podcasts can potentially capture? And what's your interaction like with, say, the Chinese foreign minister if you meet him?
Diplomacy is an art of detail in a way. Okay, there's a lot of nuance, body language, how you dress, what you say, how you look, how you hold your hands or don't hold your hands. So all of this counts. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation. It depends, the context,
National
the
relationship.
Yes, that also.
Okay.
So you try to use. It's a bit like a choreography. So you use that occasion to do the signaling. I could modulate it depending on that. So it would depend on the situation. So there are times and occasions. So I wouldn't say there's a single formula.
Okay. Very raw question for you.
Please.
So pardon me if I'm crossing a line.
No.
What's the most pissed off you've gotten at one of these meetings? I'm sure something would have been said that just irritated you as a human being. And what was your response? And you don't need to name, or you can name if you wish.
Rarely by personal things, because mostly I've learned to absorb it. I take it's par for the course for me. Okay.
So,
what happens is things do get under my skin, and I give you a recent example. I've spoken about it. I was actually landed, I forget, from Bangalore or something on a plane, and I saw this picture of this guy climbing up the Indian High Commission in London and trying to pull down a flag. So absolutely, it got under my skin. So, or if people, they try and score points, I personal points, I just shrug it. Okay, I put. But if I feel in some way the collective I, in some way is demeaned or attacked or something, yes, that's when I said, when I get pushed, okay. That I, as you rightly said, is not me the I, but I the India. But that sense that somewhere, if you're not given the respect, or you're not, if your people are condescending, or sometimes people ambush you.
Okay. And professionally, when do you feel the most alive? Like, when do you feel that you were born to do exactly this?
That's a feeling which kind of grew on me over a period of time. Part of it was, I actually studied international relations, which is not that usual for people in diplomats. Now, I'm only the second foreign minister who's actually been a diplomat. Natwar Singh was the only other guy who'd been in that. So, in a sense, my studies, my first long profession, my current responsibility, and even I had a brief break in business. Even that was international. I was with the Tata Group, and they gave me a kind of role in international business. So I've been in that sense, that feeling that you're bound to do this, frankly, has grown a lot. And in a way, I also came from a household which was very international. I live international. I mean, my family relationships are international. I spend most of my time international. So I guess it's sort of in you.
Okay. But at this stage of your life, is there any moment?
Occasionally, I do give lifestyle advice to younger people. Rarely, mostly when they ask. Okay,
Okay.
I don't dispense
Okay.
otherwise. I tell people, look, if you really like doing something, you'll be very good at it. The problem with most of us is we end up doing things which are not necessarily what we want to do.
It's what we're told to do.
It's what we're told to do, or circumstances make you.
Sure.
Okay. So for me, look, I always liked reading about the world. I like listening to music of the world. I like eating global food.
Sometimes consuming YouTube podcasts.
It's been a mix of all of that. So that what you say, we are born to do it. Yeah, sure. I mean, all of this gets into that. Yeah, it's a natural.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
This is a question that comes from the engineer inside me. Are you following the AI revolution based on whatever's happening in the world? I'm sure you are. I mean, that was just an intro to the question. Okay, that's podcasting techniques. Let's talk a little bit about the role of AI. I would love for you to also give an input on the role of quantum computing because it's come up in geopolitical conversations. How do you look at it from your perspective? The future of technology. I don't know if you should watch this show called Black Mirror.
No, I haven't.
Okay, it's about the technologies that are upcoming. And Yuval Noah Harari says that the stuff they've shown in Black Mirror is so realistic. It's either already happening or it's going to happen in 5 to 10 years.
Or it'll happen once you watch the show.
Possibly. Because science fiction determines where science goes. But do you follow whatever's happening in the world of engineering technology? And how do you look at it affecting our country, our foreign policy, etc., etc.?
I'm not an engineer. And I'll give you what I hope is like a common sense answer from my perspective. And I'll take you back actually to your first question.
Sure.
You asked me, do I watch patterns? Okay. Sure, I watch patterns. That's how I do my business. That's why I think I can be good at my business. Now, just imagine, I am humanly, because I have limited capabilities as a human being, I'm watching the patterns of 200 people who I deal with every day. Imagine if I could process the patterns of 200 million people. Okay. That's the world which you are talking about. That with each one of us, we are like a walking emitter of electronic patterns. Okay. What you download, what you say, what you listen to, what you buy, what you eat. You're creating, earlier on, there would have been a pattern, but you couldn't see it. Okay. Today, that pattern is organized. It has actually become a business. It has become politics. It has become strategy. It is actually, at the end of the day, this how do you sort of mega process patterns? And that then gives you a fantastic edge. So, imagine a Virat Kohli who has at his fingertips everything about everybody is ever going to be batting against. Man, that's a dream world, isn't it?
To be able to predict each delivery, each strategy. So maybe the way we should build out artificial intelligence as humans is we should develop an AI-based assistant for you. For you to be able to, that's
don't worry, it'll happen.
Or is it already happening? You never know. Okay. How often do quantum computing conversations come up? Because it's come up on the show from a geopolitical perspective. The first country that cracks it will...
Right now, actually, if you ask me what's right on our plate, it's much more semiconductors. There's this whole chip war which is going on. You can say a tech war which is going on. So a lot of what we are doing today is about that. And it's about how do you actually prepare for an era where, sort of chips, you can say, is the new oil. In fact, I was a week ago in Europe, and thereafter with the PM at the Quad in Japan. And a big part of those conversations were really about how countries cooperate to ensure what we call trusted collaboration, which is countries who have that faith in each other, who have similar systems. We use the word like-minded. These are normally market economies, democracies, how people with companies who follow company ethics and rules like we know. How do these countries really come together and create a kind of a supply chain? Now, here's the bit which I think particularly your younger listeners should look at. There was a time 10 years ago, well, maybe more, 7, 8 years ago even. I used to go around telling people, saying, look, you need to open up your economy more, mobility. There's Indians who would be looking for opportunities to work because we really start, especially under Prime Minister Modi, one thing he keeps dinning into us, think of the world as a global workplace. Okay, this is one regular message we get from him in every possible way.
As a global workplace?
Global workplace. That don't think, your work opportunities could be anywhere. Now, it's your job in foreign policy to open up those doors. Okay. Why should a talented Indian be restricted? Okay. Now, if you are going to work everywhere, and this doesn't have to be rocket science, okay? I mean, you have people working in merchant shipping and air crews, in blue-collar jobs, in professional jobs, as chartered accountant, any profession you take. How do you actually give a full kind of space for Indian talent to do its best? Now, coming back to this, I find because today we are moving into that tech competition or tech wars era, there's a huge demand today for trusted talent, for people who play by the rules, who understand how the international business systems work, skilled people, talented people. And these are the age group, we are looking at kind of below 35s. They are massively in demand in the world. And we just came out of Australia. We did a mobility agreement. The week before, I signed one with Austria. Austria, is not a country which you would immediately think of in terms of migration. Done it with Germany, with a number of European countries, and even with the US. Prime Minister is going to be going there next month. A lot of it is, look, how do we create the flows? Now, these kind of flows are going to be very different. It's like the world. You are very familiar, perhaps more than me. Your habits change. People don't have to leave India anymore to work somewhere. The global workplace doesn't mean you shift your place. It just means your employer doesn't have to be in the same town or the same country, or the service you render doesn't have to be there. So that's the kind of world, we are getting prepared for. So for me, if you look at the tech space, the global workplace, the mobility, the semiconductor, the what called critical emerging technologies, this is really what is sucking up the oxygen.
When I was growing up in the 2000s and early 2010s, you'd often go for family functions where the families would encourage the kids to leave India. And that used to piss me off when I was a kid. Why do you want to leave your country? Let's do something for the country. Maybe that's just the cricket fan in me talking, but it led me in the right direction. More than half of all the engineering students with me in college left the country. A lot of them wish to come back. I want you to directly address those people who are on the fence about coming back. How do we reverse this brain drain problem? That's one part of the question. 2,